I think we're live. Good evening, everyone, and big Happy New Year from me, and Happy New Year from Malcolm.
Happy New Year for 2025, quarter of the way through the 21st century.
And this year, 1st of January, is exactly 1 year since we did our very first live stream. And we managed to do a total of 11 live streams last year. We might have had hopes of doing a little more. And as we review our year, we'll make that obvious why we didn't do quite as many. But yes, first live stream, I think was a little bit, didn't quite work properly, did it? A few things went wrong with the very first one or two. But here we are on the 1st of January in 2025. And what else happened in January last year?
We'll do a little bit of a recap of
2024.
In January, I was on the NHA, National Health Association podcast, interviewed by Dr. Frank Sabatino. The National Health Association is a US body that claims to be the organisation with the longest history of recommending an SOS-free, whole foods, plant-based diet and in some circumstances, fasting. They also run events now, including travel experiences like cruises, where it's all totally SOS-free, whole foods, plant-based. At the end of January this year, I retired from clinical practice at the Clinicare practice. I didn't completely retire because I retired from the clinic work to focus solely on nutrition and lifestyle medicine, which I do by telehealth and by a limited number of in-person consultations. So that's been a big change for me this year. It's also meant that I have greater availability for people interested in seeing me for lifestyle medicine.
So the next thing that happened for us in 2024 was our, our 7-day immersion in March at the Yarra Valley Living Centre. And that actually turned out to be the only one we ran last year, but we'll explain why. We also last year did 3 introductory 4-part webinar series. One of them was in January and the other in sort of April, May, and the final one we did in November. We did have a few months off from mid-year. And following from the January webinar and the March immersion, I did 2 12-week coaching groups with them. We usually with a group of 6 or 7 people, maximum of 8. And I work with people who have actually done one of our programs. So if any of you are interested, if you're one of our alumni, you'll be offered the coaching group. And when we talk about what we're doing this year, I'll let you know how you can join us. So what else did we do? We did we tried a new venue at Queenscliff for a retreat, and we started off with running a reunion weekend for all of those people who have attended our immersion events. There's, I think, over 200 people, and we had 20 of them come to our reunion event, some of them from interstate. So that was a lot of fun. That was just a weekend event, and it was we collaborated with Anita Ricky from Diggers Veggie Kitchen in Anglesea. And we used to do 6-day immersions with her until 2021. So it's been great to work with her again and use and try out a new venue. What else? So that was in May. We did the reunion weekend. In June, the most significant thing in the plant-based world was that Dr. John McDougall died, and I know many of you watching along with us were very shocked. It was a sudden death, and we're all deeply affected by that because we did a live stream the night that we heard the news, and you can watch that on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find past live streams. And in July of last year, Malcolm and I got married. We did talk about that in a live stream a little while afterwards. And only 4 days after our marriage, we went skiing and I smashed my shoulder. It was really a catastrophic injury and needed a shoulder replacement. So that put me out of action for a couple of months, and we cancelled our September immersion as a result of that. And yeah, I think that's
That was how the winter panned
yeah,
out.
so there was no live streams for quite a few weeks or a couple of months at that point.
And then end of September, we once again went to the US of A to go to the International Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference in LA. And yeah, once again, it was a stellar lineup of speakers, including both well-known people like, Dr. Dean Ornish, and lots of lesser-known people giving all sorts of brilliant presentations. And of course, one of the things about going to a big conference like that is just interacting with all the other delegates. At the end of the conference, we then went over to Santa Rosa and went to True North Health Centre for a water-only fasting experience. Jenny had been there before with her mother, but I kept telling people I'd only ever skipped breakfast once. So I was quite apprehensive, but we did a water-only fast. And I think out of that, I now know more about supervising water-only fasting, and will on limited occasions be willing to supervise people where it's appropriate for them to, and they're set up correctly for a water-only fast. Then we ran another event in October, so we got back on the run, and within a week we were back down at this big old guest house at Queenscliff, doing another weekend event again with Anita Ricky, which was an introductory weekend with a big emphasis on Anita Ricky's cooking workshops and cooking demonstrations, and just a little bit of sort of of Jenny and I giving presentations, and that went well.
It was fabulous, yeah, and we're certainly planning to do more of those for those that just want a weekend retreat. What else? Oh, yes.
Well, the end of October was another US conference. When it gets over 4,000 people, it must be huge. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine. They're a very plant-based organisation. People like Dr. Michael Greger are some of the founders of that group. And for example, they're quite straightforward that as far as the nutrition lifestyle domain goes, they recommend a whole food, plant predominant diet. So that was for me an online conference. And I don't know if many of you have done online conferences where you've got after access to all of the presentations and it's in a different time zone. I'm still catching up on online presentations for that. Yeah. Next, we'll move on to.
So that sort of wraps up our
that
year in terms
wraps
of
up our year.
our activities and big happenings. It was a little bit of a roller coaster year for us, though, wasn't it?
It
With
was,
some great highs and a few lows.
Yeah. I think the world can probably expect another bumpy trip around the sun in 2025. So there were
actually, before you start, I will just mention for those following that if you have any questions about, Malcolm's going to now talk about the sort of notable research papers that were published in 2024. If you have any questions, if you pop them in the chat, whether you're coming via YouTube or coming via Facebook, we'll see all of those and we can address those when we're finishing. Okay.
There were many notable research publications in 2024. Starting on the 1st of January with the release of the Netflix documentary, You Are What You Eat, a twin study. And you might go, hang on, this is research, not television entertainment. Yeah, this came about because someone wanted to make a documentary and had an idea, and approached Dr. Christopher Gardner, who's an expert on running these sort of real life, nutrition intervention studies. And there are still ongoing papers being published out of this study. But while the study was being done, they made a documentary just taking a small number of the participants and having them televised during the study. And basically what they did was they took pairs of identical twins, and they did a rather short intervention where they said, okay, we'll do randomly assign one twin to do a vegan diet, not totally whole foods, but pretty healthy. And we'll assign the other one to not do anything, really worse, because you can always do a study and find a worse diet, but to do an omnivore diet, but to try and make it healthy, include plenty of vegetables and things like that. And this is an interesting study because, it compared like a reasonably healthy vegan diet with a reasonably healthy omnivore diet. And yep, you guessed it, LDL cholesterol levels, biological markers of, aging, many things changed favorably in a rather short 8-week study of these twins. The next study, I guess, that struck me as important was one in March. Like, what happens when someone eats more carbohydrates and they have diabetes? And all the low carbers in Australia, most of our doctors would go, oh yeah, they're going to need a lot more insulin. Well, they took people with type 1 diabetes, so that all the insulin was injected, so they would know how much they needed to use. And the PCRM group got Mastering Diabetes on board, helping out, and had these people eat a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. Insulin doses required dropped by 28%. Sensitivity to insulin, that is how much insulin you need to put away, an amount of carbohydrate, actually, I think more or less doubled. So, I mean, this is sort of proof of concept that when you eat more healthy whole food carbs, that rather than having all these high glucose and high insulin, you actually end up making the body more sensitive to insulin by taking out the fats and improve diabetes control. The next study was very exciting one in June, and that was Dr. Dean Ornish's study of mild cognitive impairment, early Alzheimer's disease, like people who had been given a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease but were in the early stages. And he did a 1-year intervention, or was it 6 months? 1 year, I think. Anyway, it was very intensive. They delivered food to these people, or usually person and carer or partner, and they had them do exercise classes and meditation, de-stressing exercises, and take a whole host of supplements, which is not really our approach. But basically, Dean Ornish said, I'm going to throw all the lifestyle things that I know at these people, including a vegan, whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet, and see what happens to their Alzheimer's. Well, 4 out of 4 scores of cognitive function actually on average improved. So they showed that people who already had early Alzheimer's disease actually had an improvement in cognitive function and a reduced decline over the course of the study. This was a randomized controlled study. The group that were told to not do anything, you're disappointed. They said, no, don't do anything. Keep doing what you're doing. And at the end of the study, you can do our program for free. Interestingly, Dean Ornish talked about this at the conference, and I think he's even had some video clips on this. And he went back, and they went back and spoke to some of these people, like way after the study.
5 years later.
5 years later. And
I'm still doing okay.
There were many, a number of them were still doing okay, and it had just turned their life around from being someone who just couldn't do what they wanted to do and forgot things, to people who had a bit more clarity and in ways that were meaningful for the individuals. So that was that study, which I've talked too much about. Another one was like, well, you can have a whole foods plant-based diet, or you can have a whole foods plant-based diet plus extra virgin olive oil. Which one would get the better result? Now we're biased in this, but you know, the world needed a head-to-head study like this. So a head-to-head study was done, and yep, they got better cholesterol results and better blood sugar control, and a number of other markers were improved in the group that ate a whole food plant-based diet rather than
With
adding the
no
EVA with
oil.
no oil. I must add, with this study, it was interesting because the whole foods plant-based group, there was lots of nuts and seeds, and it was actually, from our perspective, quite a high-fat whole foods plant-based diet. But what it really showed is that adding extra virgin olive oil to our diet tends to make things worse, not better. Another study was, another big systematic review and meta-analysis came out in August, looking at plant and animal protein intake and the development of type 2 diabetes. And yeah, when people ate more plant protein or added more plant protein to the diet, you know, it's this sort of observational. Actually, it was a meta-analysis, so looking at lots of studies. So an association was found. People eat more plant protein, they get less type 2 diabetes. People eat more animal protein, they get more type 2 diabetes. Who would have ever thought that it wasn't the carbs, it was the meat and fat all along? Also during this year, there were some other studies reported where they'd looked at people's in many different countries and analysed red meat intake and the onset of type 2 diabetes, and found quite a robust association that where people eat more red meat, more of them are going to get type 2 diabetes. This even appeared in our local media briefly. Then there was a local study reported that they looked at people who professed to be eating low carb diets, and yeah, they were more likely to get type 2 diabetes than those who weren't. So medicine, health professionals in Australia have not taken note of all of these studies. But hey, I guess what we're here to try and give you an authentic and more truthful message. There were some key posts that we made during the year, and new or updated web pages. And well, one of them was after Frank Sabatino and many other people. You know, when I talk about, you know, our immersion program and things, you know, we promote a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. We always get this statement: "What about good fats? What about good fats? Good fats?" And it's become a bit of a slogan. And I sort of get what it means. But anyway, we wrote an FAQ called "What are good fats?" So if you want to sort of redefine your definition of good fats, which might not be in exact agreement with us, then have a look at our FAQ on what are good fats. Another little scoop we had was a study by Stanley Hazen and team, the group that found TMAO, and then last year, the previous year, found PAG. I'm not talking about PAG today, though. This study.
Can you explain just briefly what they, as a group, what they are, PAG and TMAO?
Yeah. They're substances that you measure in the blood that the gut microbiome make, and depending on what you eat, they'll make none or some or more of these substances. And for example, there's a lot of work being done on TMAO, and you can watch Dr. Michael Greger's videos on that. And TMAO is, you know, when you eat red meat and eggs, your gut microbes will make TMAO, which is an artery-damaging substance. And when you eat more protein, your gut microbes will also make PAG, which is associated with more heart failure and progression of heart failure. But anyway, the same team did some studies and found a couple more of these sort of metabolites, 4-PY and 2-PY. But they found that when people took niacin supplements, that's vitamin B3, or that's the anti-skin cancer drug, nicotinamide, that whole niacin family of vitamin B3. When people took high doses of that, and it's often in supplements, and it's in B group vitamins, and it's in some breakfast cereals and things. So when people took more niacin, they actually had more of these metabolites that seem to have adverse effects that, you know, associated with more heart disease. So I guess there's a bit of a warning in studies like this that sort of go, whenever you take a nutrient and take a supplement where the nutrient's taken out of its normal context and artificially concentrated, there can be adverse effects. It's not just harmless or just in case.
Actually, maybe segue onto the DHA
And
one
more
we found.
recently, Jenny was looking for material on this mysterious, reference ranges and optimal ranges for omega-3 test, results and things.
Because we'd had a few people share that had an omega-3 test and shared the results saying, what does this mean? And so I was trying to find the science where the lab had said the reference range of ideal reference range was between 8 and 12%. And I think unless you were supplementing or eating an awful lot of fish, you would never get anywhere near that. So I was trying to find what science is this lab using to make this claim, and I'm still looking.
And Jenny found a recent article that looked at DHA levels, that's the long chain omega-3, DHA levels, and found a positive association with osteoporosis risk. Then she found articles that seemed to contradict that, but they only found that, that ALA, the purely plant-based omega-3, if anything, had a beneficial effect for bone.
The contradiction was in the conclusion. When you read an abstract of an article and you find that one says, higher levels are associated with better bone health, and you go, how does this fit with this other one? But you look into the fine detail of the research paper and you realise that, they're not
There was no
contradictory.
conflict. DHA seemed to be associated with levels seem to be associated with osteoporosis, and if you just looked at the ALA omega-3, in your flax and your soy and your green leafies, there, if anything, there was a beneficial association. So we did a big update on our omega-3 section in our vitamins and minerals section.
On our website.
On the website. So someone's gone back and said, how does B3, are you saying that vitamin B3 or niacin impacts heart disease in a negative way? Yes. Interestingly, this sort of research explains the finding many decades ago that you could lower cholesterol with niacin, and it did lower it. But it didn't seem to reduce heart risk, which was puzzling. But if excess niacin generates these substances like 4-PY that make the blood clottier and make more risk of having heart and stroke events, that sort of explains why perhaps why the niacin didn't work. So yeah, don't take excessive niacin. It should only be used as skin cancer prevention as nicotinamide in those who are extremely high risk and getting repeated multiple skin cancers. Documentaries.
Well, there was another one you jumped over.
I jumped over the other one. Yes, yeah. Well, I was driven crazy.
Web, what do we do it as? An FAQ or a web page?
Like you've probably been talking about the studies with diabetes and actually how counterintuitive for many of our practitioners in Australia, eating more of our healthy, whole grain, legume, carbs rather than the low carb meat, eggs, etc., seems to improve the function of insulin, reduce diabetes risk. But what's driven me a bit crazy is seeing all the advertisements for continue. There's a group in Australia that says that it will improve your health, help you lose weight by giving you a continuous glucose monitor, one of those sort of stick-on patches you wear for a couple of weeks. And so you can check and look for glucose spikes. You can make sure that your glucose is not rising after food and identify foods where it rises more quickly. And making quite outlandish claims that are not really backed up by the science about how this could benefit you and lead you to better health, whereas really it could lead you to eating more meat and eggs and thinking that you're doing yourself a favour. So I wrote an FAQ on glucose spikes and continuous glucose monitoring.
That was just a little list of the some of the updated web pages and posts that we did last year, and I'll come back to something else that's in the comments in a moment, but we'll just run through a few other things. There was a key documentary that came out in 2024, and that is Christspiracy. We did a post about that because we were fortunate enough to see it back in March when it was available to those who had helped crowdfund. It's the same team that did What the Health and Cowspiracy. Have I done something else as well? Anyway, and so Christspiracy was very, very interesting, and we did a post on that. We won't go through that now, but it is now available on the Christspiracy website. They might want you to make a donation to watch it, but it's well worth watching.
It is very controversial. Will upset a lot of people, because it looks at the different major religions of the world, and how they justify killing animals, and looking at the historical sort of background of these religions, and looking at interviewing all sorts of experts on this, and actually coming to the conclusion that that Jesus belonged to a group that was more plant-based, and the part of the big issue, or part of his big issue with the temple and the tables and the trading, was the temple had turned into an animal sacrificing centre. But anyway, very controversial, and well worth watching. And I was a bit stunned to hear some Buddhist leader saying, "Oh no, I don't kill animals. I get someone else to kill them." And I thought, you sound like a mafia leader that's telling us you don't kill anyone, you just have hitmen instead. But anyway, we won't preempt that interesting and controversial documentary. We'll let you watch it.
So what have we got planned for 2025? Well, certainly we've talked about some of the articles that we wrote on both our Facebook page, and also that we've started to post on our website under a new sort of tab called articles. We didn't get very far with that mid-year, but we certainly plan. Often we write posts that have a considerable thought that goes into them, and it might date back to 2018 or 2021, and we want to sort of unpack some of that material, because you'll never find it again if it's an old Facebook post, and put some of those up as articles that we can then share a little bit more. So it's sort of, in that sense, capturing what we've done in the past, as well as writing new stuff for the future. So we hope to have a little bit more added to that in the near future. The next website update, Malcolm's been rewriting the protein requirements section of the website, and doing lots of
it's a little
QA.
It's a little sort of like a little Q&A on document on protein requirements.
Because we are driven crazy by the protein question, and so Malcolm's really drilled down to that. So that will be something coming soon. We might even do a live stream when we launch that. So we have coming up just in a few weeks, and I do understand that it is fully booked at the moment, and that there is a wait list. But I'm still going to mention it because it might be worth adding your name to the wait list if you'd like to come. Plant Powered Melbourne, together with Doctors for Nutrition, are hosting Dr. Kim Williams at a meetup, a Plant Powered Melbourne meetup, on Saturday, the 11th of January. And it's being bookings are through Humanitix, which Doctors for Nutrition have set up, and they're obviously hopeful that you might make a donation, but otherwise entry is bringing a dish. And we did set maximum numbers, and after discussing with Peter Johnson, who helps us facilitate Plant Powered Melbourne, that the venue can take maybe a few more than that. We might up the numbers. So as I say, if you're interested in that event, it's in Balwyn on the 11th at 5:30 p.m. You must book. But even if you see it still saying that there's a wait list, add your name to it, and hopefully we'll be able to let you come. So that's this month. We've got our next immersion, our 7-day immersion, will be 16th to the 23rd of March at the Yarra Valley Living Centre. And this will be the only one we'll be running at that venue this year. So if you're someone that's been wanting to try it out, we say, please do come to the next one. We're not sure when there'll be another one at that particular site. There's the possibility of us using the Queenscliff venue for an immersion, but we're not sure whether it's going to work for the 7-day one. The thing we love about the 7-day immersion is that you're in such a peaceful, tranquil environment, in effect, kind of cut off from all the worries of our society. And Queenscliff is kind of just in the middle of Queenscliff, so it's not quite the same. Anyway, watch that space. But get in touch with us, particularly get in touch with me if you are interested in coming to our next 7-day immersion, which is all the food is whole food, plant-based, low in sodium, low in fat, and you get the wonderful lectures from ourselves and
Peter Johnston,
colleague Peter Johnson, and a couple of other guest lectures. And it's
such a wonderful venue location.
Sure is. And we'd love to go on at length about what our feedback we get. We get some pretty positive feedback, and we have a little bit of that listed on our website. We're doing our next webinar series beginning right at the end of March, running into April before Easter. So if you're interested in that, it's a far less expensive way of listening to us than coming to the immersion, which obviously we have to pay for accommodation and food, so it's more expensive. So that'll be
it's a mini introduction to the why, what, and how nutrition, of whole foods, plant-based nutrition.
And we usually run about 3 of those per year. Every year in the last, I think, 4 or 5, we've done one in January, but we've got a bit much on this month, so we're not. So it'll be 30th of March, the next one will start. We'll probably do another introductory weekend with Anita at the Queenscliff venue. We just haven't set a date. It might be in the second half of the year. So again, you can watch that space. Do we have any? We wrote some notes for this, and we're at the end of our list of notes. Anything we've forgotten about what we're planning?
No. I've had some vague thoughts about doing something in culinary medicine.
Huh?
See me cooking in front of a camera, can't you?
No, I think we'll leave it to the experts. Okay.
Someone had a question about the reference range. Do you want to talk about the reference range and the companies that do the testing and all the issues with that?
So the test results that have been shared with us, it's not something that we encourage people to have an omega-3 test, but there was some research going on run by a couple of Australian and Kiwi colleagues that were doing a clinical trial into the effect of having the, sort of ALA, having the plant form of omega-3 and the impact of that, of having, say, more or less on your omega-3 levels in the blood. And so what was shared with me, particularly for the main value of the omega-3 test, I think most people were around the 4 to 5% mark, and yet it said that the ideal was 8 to 12%. And so that's why, as I say, a couple of people shared with me and said, what does this mean? Do I need to have more? And so all I did, the only thing I could find, you go on site to the testing lab, and I note that they also sell supplements. Say no more on that aspect. They refer to research that indicates that more is better, but they don't actually quote the research, and I haven't been able to find it. What I have found is when there's been studies going back over the past 20 years, one of them, which I think might have been using Framingham cohort data, had shown that there was a bit of a difference if you were above or below 4%. So that seemed to be, from the groups, they'd done sort of 4 quartiles, and the quartiles that were below 4%, that there was, some evidence of, maybe a few health issues. So, as I say, I can't find anything that says that that you need to be up around that 8 to 12%. But I mean, it can frighten people into thinking, my goodness, I need to supplement. And that's why along the way, when I was doing this, sort of literature searching, I came across things that were negative for having high levels in the blood. So, there's always a caution from us around taking isolated, concentrated nutrients. You want to make sure that the benefits from taking that supplement far outweigh any risk. So, for example, if you've got very low iron, you might need to supplement, to bring your iron levels
But
up.
if you've already got normal, healthy iron levels, you may actually just be giving yourself more oxidative stress.
So the same goes for any supplement. The only one that we say you must take is B12, and that is because the risks of being low can actually be quite dangerous. So it's a case of, if you're vegan, if you're plant-based, not eating animal foods, just supplement B12. Okay, does anyone want to ask us any questions before we wind up our little live stream, our New Year's Day live stream? Please type them in the comment or in the chat, and we'll answer it. Otherwise, we've kind of said all we're going to say, and not sure when we'll do our next one. Sometimes we think, it'd be nice just to jump online and talk about something. So we might sometimes do that without much
we won't jump
warning.
Online just for the sake of putting in a social media appearance. That's not our style.
Because all of our live streams you can view on our YouTube channel. So if you miss any of them, if you're interested in things we've talked about in the past, you can go and browse. And we'll get a little bit better in naming what they're all about, and so on. But anyway, so we do have something. Oh, thanks, Bev. Yeah, keeping them honest. We're always looking for. When we look at research, we're always looking at who's funded it, and actually,
we're also looking, when we're looking at research where there are positive findings. We'll also look at. We'll do the very much compared to what, and we'll also look at it and think, okay, it was statistically significant, but sometimes things change by this much, and it's like, is that clinically significant? Like, would I recommend this to lower someone's cholesterol or something like that if it only really changed that much? So we often look at that too, the actual clinical significance, and for whom, who does this, which group does this benefit? I'm sure there'd be some terrible, essential fats imbalanced diets out there where it probably would be better to take some DHA, but does this apply to people eating healthy whole foods plant-based diet with plenty of ALA?
Well, it's also the way reductionist science is done, particularly in nutrition, where they're looking at the effect of one thing on, one other thing, and without looking at the whole. Now, if you've read any of T. Colin Campbell's work, you'll know that that's what he talks about a lot. But the implications for things like, if you read something about, protein, the elderly need more protein. And I found some stats whereby a huge percentage of Australians over 75 have poor kidney function. And this elderly need more protein sort of mantra that gets rolled out is based on, small amounts of research that are showing, you might get this tiny benefit if you have, 1.0 or 1.2 grams per kilogram of protein per day. But it doesn't actually tie in with the negative.
No, like what about
negatives of having excess protein? Same with the omega-3. When they talk about the benefits, we found this minuscule cognitive benefit amongst the groups that supplemented, but they don't,
they might not tell you that it'll increase your risk of a common heart rhythm problem, atrial fibrillation, that can give you a stroke, and that's not going to be good for your cognitive function at all. Or in the case of, recommending more protein for the elderly, particularly, animal protein, when so many of them have impaired kidney function, is that the animal protein, if you like, gives the kidneys a bit of a beating and accelerates kidney decline. So it's really the the last thing you want to do for this particular group of people.
Yes. Anyway, it always frustrates us when there's headlines around the world that study shows this, and the study authors are so focused on what they're looking at and they don't mention any other implications. So. And that's why I was a bit taken aback when I found the osteoporosis DHA connection. I thought, surely this can't be true. And, went digging further. And then there had been some other research that preceded it. It wasn't a totally new thing, but the publication was just in the last 6 months that I came across. Anyway, so yes, Bev, I'll put some information about the immersion after once we've wound up this live stream. And yes, Sandy, I wouldn't be bothered supplementing. I just think you've got to really look at what would be the benefits and what are the risks and balance those together. Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments, we'll say good night. And again, have a happy new year. All the best for 2025, and we'll catch you in this space again soon. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.